The white supremacy. Thank you. The white supremacy is felt every day in the body and in the spirit. But it's also a place of connection, keeping among the layers of populations in Clarksdale. African-American folks still seeking freedom, the Choctaw people, displaced but still hanging on. Chinese immigrants brought to work on the railroads, the Irish navigating the precarious process of reinvented whiteness. Magic, our linchpin for this night or evening, afternoon, I guess, might describe all the ways that people tap into spirit and resilience in this film, all the ways of psychic and even physical protection, as well as transcendence. All of the moments where the ancestors are called for help and for company, whether it's through church, conjure, or voodoo, music, tears, dancing, food, laughter, and sex. Yvonne Chirot, the professor of religious studies and author of the book Black Magic, Religion, and the African-American Conjuring Tradition, and who will incidentally be coming to DePaul in February, on the evening of February 20th, was a consultant on hoodoo and conjure for sinners. And she writes about the ever-presence of magic historically for Black people. And just a quick quote, she says, where there are preachers, there are also conjurers. Where there are conversions, there are also dreams and visions. And where there is faith, there is and ever continues to be magic. We might also think of cinema as a kind of magic. As my daughter Cece says, 2 Michael B. Jordans is pretty amazing and magical by itself. Cinema is a way to transform us through light and color and sound, to move us, to help us breathe, and also to remember. So to bring us all back into the film, we all chose an undeniable scene that might get us started. And
I've been hearing about this one particular young man all day. He's supposed to be a bad blues man. Preacher boy, where you at? Come on here, man. My little cousin, y'all. Watch this. Hold on. Tell me who you are. Where you from?
I'm Sammy Moore. I'm a sharecropper from Sunflower Plantation. They call me Preacher Boy, counting my daddy being the pastor. I wrote this song for him. Something I've been wanting to tell you for a long time. It might hurt you, hope you don't lose your mind. Well, I was just a boy, about 8 years old. You threw me a Bible on that Mississippi road. See, I love you, Papa, you did all you could do. And they say the truth hurts, so I lied to you. Yes, I lied to you. I love the blues.
Y'all move your feet now. Come on now.
Somebody take me in your arms tonight. Well, all right. Somebody take me in your arms tonight. Yeah. Somebody take me in your arms tonight.
Blues wasn't forced on us like that religion. No, so we brought this with us from home. It's magic what we do. It's sacred. And big.
There are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true it can pierce the veil between life and death, conjuring spirits from the past
Somebody take me
and the future.
Somebody take me in your arms tonight. Oh. Somebody take me.
Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Gardner. I am the Assistant Director at the Center for Black Diaspora. And I'm so happy to be introducing this dynamic panel. So today on our panel, we have Dr. Simone Johnson, who is an assistant professor in the Department of African and Black Diaspora Studies from San Antonio, Texas, by way of Cincinnati, Ohio. She is a proud alumna of Spelman College in 2017 and the proud alumna of University of Notre Dame in 2022. As an anthropologist, her research areas include care and wellness, Black and Afro-diasporic spiritual systems and expressive culture, and local applications of social change approaches, healing, restorative, and transformative justice. Professor Johnson's peer-reviewed writing, We Got, Urban Black Ecologies of Care and Mutual Aid, published in 2022, and Jailbreak of the Imagination, Anthropology, and the Practice of Abolition can be found in Environment and Society in the Annual Review of Anthropology, respectively. Her course offerings at DePaul include African American People's Ideas, Cultural Movements, Black Feminist Theories, Anthropology of the African Diaspora, and Zora Neale Hurston, Folklore, Fiction, Feminism. In addition to her role as a writer and educator, Professor Johnson is a lover of performance and visual arts with a history in musical and dramatic theater, dance, curatorial, and art museum education. Now in her spare time, she plays jazz and gospel piano and is also an avid commuter and a recreational bicyclist. This fall, she is bringing her personal passions to the classroom and the streets, teaching her first Explore Chicago session at DePaul called Cycling the City. So welcome, Dr. Johnson. We also have Dr. Tara Betts. Tara is the author of the poetry collections Refuse to Disappear, Earth Inhabiting and Art and Hue. Tara currently teaches at DePaul University's Peace Studies program and Solstice MFA program. Her poems, essays, and stories have appeared in numerous anthologies and journals. So welcome, Dr. Tara. Next, we have Shamar James. Shamar serves as a student support specialist in the Dean of Students Office, where he provides care and guidance to students in crisis. Before that, he worked in student affairs as a senior administrative assistant. He earned both his bachelor's and master's degrees in entrepreneurship with a minor in Spanish. A passionate storyteller and creative writer, Shamar published his first novel, The Adventures of Zorak Zoomster, at just 16 years old. Since then, he's gone on to create the fantasy comic series Modern Monarchy, The Caveman King. The portrait collection inspired a decade of imagination and reflection, and most recently, Seasonal Crisis, Battle of the Books. Shamar's dream is to see his stories brought to life on screen and to inspire others to keep writing and never give up on their creative goals. So welcome, Shamar. Also on our panel, we have John Ziegler, who is the director of DePaul University's Egan Office of Urban Education and Community Partnerships. John recognizes that the most effective solutions to community issues should be community-driven. For over 25 years, he has worked in the capacity of counselor, educator, community activist, lobbyist, therapist, researcher, and creative artist in Chicago communities. John also is the senior program director for the Golden Institute, where he helps to construct global and local grassroots organizational development. He believes in the power of building effective networks and creating opportunities for community partners to share their practices, promising ideas and challenges to create impact. His work is rooted in the belief that if we create the right environments, people will organize together and solve their own problems. He works with local leaders to assess the opportunities and needs that can be addressed by leveraging internal resources with external investment. While director of the Egan Urban Center, he was awarded the Gandhi King Ikeda, a Legacy of Building Peace Award given by Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. John has been awarded the Peace Corps Laurette Miller Ruby, excuse me for the mispronouncement, award for outstanding community service, Young Chicago Authors Wallace Douglas Distinguished Service Award, and the State of Illinois Everyday Hero All-Stars Project Community Leadership Award. He is an asset-based community development and Shannon Institute Fellow. He is also an adjunct faculty at DePaul University. So welcome, Tom. Our final panelist is Ms. Kayla Hodge. Kayla is a graduate student currently pursuing a degree in critical ethnic studies at DePaul University. She's DePaul Art Museum Student Fellow, as well as the Graduate Assistant for the Critical Ethnic Studies program. Kayla is a passionate and results-driven museum and cultural professional with extensive experience in curatorial research, exhibition planning, and community engagement. So welcome, Kayla. And
Okay, well, now that we're all warmed up, I can't wait to hear the thoughts of these great minds that we have gathered here. So I have a few questions, but I just wanted to start by giving you the chance to just talk about, like, what is it that's special to you about the film? And we can start any of those. Okay, go.
It's like I feel like I'm constantly unpacking pieces of my life too, right? And so I'm revisiting my family. I called my auntie up, she's like in her 90s. I'm like, well, tell me about this and when you were born. And so I'm constantly, I'm in this renewal of understanding who I am, in some of this. And really thinking about, why did she have this other particular? Why did she wear this thing around her neck? This is the ugliest jewelry, Grandma. What is that you wear? And certain things that we couldn't say in the house while I was staying with my auntie. And so now revisiting those stories, right? And the sadness is a lot of them are not with us anymore. So I'm trying to desperately look for archival things, right, to unpack. And so that's sort of spurred me into that direction, which is really pleasant.
I think for me, one of the things I find so compelling about the film is the cultural sensitivity that Kugler, the director, brought to the script and the film itself, to put it I think to shoot it in 70 millimeter and to do the things he did craft wise, I feel like he was not just trying to do something other filmmakers hadn't done, but to be like, our stories deserve this level of craft. And that's often the dismissal of a lot of Black art in different mediums in general. It's like, it doesn't have craft. It's just flashy. It's just style, you know? And I'm like, well, they just know how to do that. You know, if you watch Dancing with the Stars, that's usually how they are. And I'm like, no, that's training, that's craft, that's education. And I think for me, it's been really exciting to watch Ryan Coogler talk about that in very public ways. So for me, that's been exciting. And then also too, the fact that part of that was hiring cultural consultants that are fully credited on the film to underscore that. There was a Native American consultant, there was a Hoodoo consultant, you know, and that they're thinking about, like, can we put the real history in? And I think that's what makes part of the story so compelling.
Yeah, I really agree. I think the craftsmanship of it and just how like layered and detailed and thoughtful it was really amazing. I think it was like expertly kind of weaving in magic and music and history and storytelling. I've seen it like 3 times now, and I feel like it's folklorish on the one hand, but also feels like an epic at the same time with how like just how much of a journey it encompasses. Yeah, so I feel like it's just given me something to like really talk about and to just go on and on and on about, which I really love. It's just like the best movie I think I've seen in a while, which is just good. So yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I think it was such an important film for, especially this year, as we're seeing like Black history being erased in front of our eyes, unfortunately. And there's such an attack on Black history right now. But, you know, I was part of a Black Student Union trip back in 2016 when I was an undergrad in DePaul. And we visited the African American History Museum and like saw how beautiful the history was in person, right? And so to have a film like this that is really showing you how important and how rich Black history is and Black culture is, I think is just so crucial during this time. That scene that they display is actually one of my favorite scenes because you kind of see the evolution of music and the culture and kind of the blend of everything. And even watching the film, it's like I didn't even really understand you know, the relationship between other groups of color, the Chinese immigrants and Native Americans. So that was like, oh, I didn't know about that. I didn't know like that's how they interacted during that time. And so, you know, there's little Easter eggs sometimes that we came up on Easter weekend, but then you see in the film that you didn't notice. And if you watch it more than one time, you pick up more and more things.
To echo your sentiment about the timeliness of the film itself, the timeliness of this event, which is taking place in Heritage Month, right, which is a relatively new development, right, established by Chicago Hoodoos, which has a very strong contingency. I think, you know, in part because of its historical connection to Mississippi, right, which is very much so in stone. And yeah, I guess like as a part of my opening remarks, like John, I am thinking about my family as I was watching the film in preparation for this event. I kept thinking about my grandmother, who is from Alabama on my father's side, and people from Alabama migrated to Cincinnati. And I thought about her humming, her incessant humming, and you know that presence of that sound in the film as a way of expressing lament and grief, and transforming that, transmuting that into something else, which I think really speaks to the transformative magic, the soul magic of music and expressive culture more broadly, and just how every day it truly is. Yeah, I'm like excited really to talk about it so in all ways. So yeah, so glad.
Your remarks, Simone, remember the scene with Delta Slim where he's remembering his friends and what happened, and how the lynching as well as the chain gang and just he went into a more there's nothing he can say. And then he comes and they break his song and he really feel that really well. So, okay, well, speaking of hoodies, since our theme is speaking, but our theme is magic, and I'm wondering, magic, who do the conjure people? Since only the Black life that isn't often talked about, especially in popular culture. I mean, unless I think subculturally in our homes and other places it is. But I was just wondering what you thought about the treatment of conjure among other forms of magic, and what if there's something that you wanted to see, something that you were glad that you saw, something that you thought would open things up even more.
It was nice to see a dignified portrayal. Not that it had to be super bougie or anything like that, but when you think about what voodoo and hoodoo has looked like in movies in the past, and even some of the past vampire movies where there are Black characters, it wasn't a character like Annie, where she's somebody who's in the community, everybody knows her, she's that wearing some crazy outfit, but she's very in tune with the practice. And the practice is syncretized with other stuff, which we all know, there's a colonial presence. The syncretizing is going to happen. We're going to have this picture of Jesus in front of this, right? And it's very subtle. It's not beating you over the head with it, but it's there, So it's a matter of, like you said, you watch it 2 or 3 times and you see it, and then you're like, oh, there. But I don't know. I kept thinking about the threshold. How important, like when you see the roof open up,
Yes.
that's when the veil breaks. But it's also like the scene that everybody keeps parodying or doing parodies of is the scene where cornbread can't come in, right? That's very much like, no, he can't cross the threshold. And that's what makes it kind of tense, but also kind of funny for people, right? We know, it's like, yeah, we know why you can't come in. And that drama that they play it with makes it so powerful. But we all know the threshold is where everything changes.
To that point, I think I really appreciated how they did not sensationalize hoodoo in a way that I think it has historically been sensationalized in the media. And not only that, excuse me, I'm getting a little cold too, but Annie is such a central character in the film, and so important because it's her knowledge, her awareness of the earth, of herbs, of different medicines that helps the characters to survive as long as they do, and actually helps them to become aware of what's going on around them in the first place. So I think really it brings some integrity to the spiritual system that is hoodoo and treats it with the, I think, respect it deserves as not only a spiritual system, but as a knowledge system. And I think the truth of the matter is that many spiritual practitioners, hoodoo practitioners at this time were very social characters in their communities, not only as healers, but as people who are very involved in the social lives of these communities as well, as protectors of sorts, right? So I appreciated that treatment in the film. Yeah, and of the ways that the film interrogates also the hoodoo philosophy around life and death and the continuity between life and death. Like in the end when Smoke dies, but you don't see him die. He just continues to live on and returns to Annie and his child. I think that's very representative of the belief around life and death and how it continues on within the voodoo tradition and within Afro-diasporic, spiritual traditions more broadly.
Yeah. I like how they, it was normalized in a way that, you go to the store and you can pick up some eggs, but by the way, you can go buy this Annie and you can get that, mojo bag or whatever, right? And so it wasn't mystified, it wasn't to what you're saying, it wasn't sort of told in a way where it's dark magic. It was part of the community, she was part of the community. And people went to her for whatever, and I think one of the interesting pieces of research is that the person who played her, she's Nigerian and she is Yoruba, right? And so it's interesting, but she didn't know about the practice herself, right? You know, and so I always had this thing about how do you make the abstract concrete, right? And that was a very concrete piece. It wasn't abstract. It was normal. Especially when two girls came into the store, picked up whatever, right? And went their way, right? Than anything. Which I thought in the first time I saw it, I'm like, okay, like it's an age or something, but no, they're getting the mother is something devoted, right? Yeah.
I think just as we're talking about Annie, as I was rewatching the film, what I appreciated was that the conversation that she had with her and Smoke, I believe, where he was asking her about like her practices, and he was like, "Well, why wasn't enough to say nothing?" Or our baby.
Yeah.
And that was just like, dang. Why do you gotta say about that? But you know, I think she despite the disappointments that she's had with her practices, she's still firm in what she's doing.
Yeah.
And it didn't stop her from, you know, holding it true to who she was. And so I think that's true for anything, right? And so you're not always gonna have all the answers with your spiritual beliefs or practices, but it's done enough for you where you can still kind of hold on. And I think that's what made her character so strong.
I agree. I think it was just really educational for me, having not really seen so many depictions. Really, I don't think any I've seen of voodoo in like media or TV. And yeah, I felt like it was really educational for me in that regard to kind of just see like what are the different, you know, the woodworking and just kind of see her do that. And then also kind of tying together what you all are saying about like the cycle of kind of life and death, but then also maybe Smoke kind of perceiving the lack of, you know, magic being able to save your child is like a limitation sort of, but in maybe that broader context, it's not necessarily about, you know, being able to like be on this sort of, you know, living plane, and maybe there's like a deeper, you know, level to that as well. And like, I think just throughout all of the film in general, like sort of the themes of like fear around death, but also knowing that you have to fight and protect and that you will be reunited on the other side with your loved ones. It has that sort of like pain and like bittersweetness to it, but then it comes back around. So
every word is coming to mind right now because of what you said earlier, that we were never meant to survive, right? Which is not to say that there are all these structures that are against us and they're trying to get us, but that we genuinely are not meant to live forever. Right? And we should not take life for granted or rest in the fact that we are going to directly reap the benefits of the struggles that we are engaged in right now. And it is for some broader purpose. That idea that we were never meant to survive releases us in some way, or has an opportunity to release us from the fear of death, actually.
There's also just like this kernel of joy in that bittersweet ending too, right? Like you could tell Ryan was thinking of Black Joy, because there's the moment when Smoke is dying and he looks and he kind of looks happy. Like we know he's dying, but he's like, no, I'm gonna see Annie and my baby. She done told me, put out my cigarette, you know? And then you switch to seeing Buddy Guy, aka Preacher Boy, in the club. They're probably down at Buddy Guy's downtown. And then when Stack and Haley walk in, what's her name in the movie? Mary. Mary walks in the film, and you know, you think this could be a tense moment. Are they finally gonna take him to vampire heaven or whatever? And they just start talking in that moment when they're like, we had a good time that night, didn't we? And it made me think about, you know, because I grew up above my grandparents' tavern. It's like, if that was all you had all week, for a lot of working class people, When is the one moment when you're happy? When do you get to let go? And that's what joints were.
Yeah.
You know, particularly in sharecropper, where were you gonna go? Right? So it was kind of like this nice closure for those characters, but you also had this moment, it's like, where do we find joy? And how do we carry it when this world is so terrible to us?
Yeah.
You know, and I just kept, like, I had to do this and that cry a little bit because it felt like, yeah, it's like it's supposed to be just a vampire movie, but it's not just a vampire movie.
Yeah.
Here's this interesting because, you know, to that point, there's this thing they kept saying, this is freedom, this is, I felt free.
Yes.
That moment, you know,
Right.
and there was a juxtaposition also being in the Jew joint and the church.
Mhm.
There was always that thing, you know, and, yeah, I could see that, you know, even if, like, to your point, like, if it was only an hour,
Right.
2 hours, I felt free.
It always makes me think too, like when we think about the blues, we think of it, yeah, it's gonna reference hoodoo. But even when I'm watching that scene again, I'm just thinking, oh, this was like shadow work. That's what we call it now, right? When we go into those dark places, we don't want to acknowledge. He's writing a song about lying to his daddy who's a preacher, you know, or all those ugly things that we don't want to talk, or the things we really want to say.
All right.
So I think we don't acknowledge how much therapy came out of creating this music, how much healing and space we gave ourselves.
It's also an explanation for why it's been stigmatized later, right? Or
Mhm.
why by outsiders.
Yeah.
Right, who don't understand or don't want to understand Black culture, right?
Mhm.
And the way that Black people who are telling their life stories through these blues are living out loud, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly of it. It's
Well, we could watch a moment, we pulled up that last scene, but we also pulled up the scene with Remick. And that might be a good scene to think about, something that was on my mind, and I'm sure it was too, like in terms of the history of the music, popular music, as an example, all those tensions. And in particular, like from this topic, I was thinking about someone like the 48 or Sammy, when he was for play, he's worked all day at the plantation, and you know, his music is his path to freedom, and a lot of blues and other like musicians, street musicians, saw music as a way to not have to fight for part of labor necessarily, not that music wasn't part. If they were lucky, they were able to do that. But there's also spiritual pressures as well, taking stories like all the traditions. So should I watch that one? Okay.
Go, go, keep running, make it to sunrise.
Well, it all worked out. And you going to kill Annie. What is wrong with you, man? I want your stories. And I want your songs. And you gonna have mine.
Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done. On earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses. As we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Long ago, the man who stole my father's land forced these words upon us. I hated those men, but the words still bring me comfort.
Hey, stay your ass down.
Boy. Those men lied to themselves and lied to us. They told stories of a God above and a devil below.
and lies of a dominion of man over beast and earth.
Sorry I couldn't keep you safe. Don't be sorry. You always did.
We are earth and beast and God. We are woman and man. We are connected, you and I, to everything. You will taste the sweet pain of death. We will make beautiful music together.
So much to unpack in this week, like whether we're talking about like colonialism, how Irish became white, what reference is in there, how it's a vampire movie, all these things. So I'm just gonna open it up to you all to unpack it and tell me a little bit about what you're thinking about when you're watching that scene and that conclusion or not quite conclusion.
I think for me, I feel like this is a scene that people were maybe not doing, you know? Like I've seen a lot of people, and I think it's because again, that like barrier, I think, that kind of when you're raised in Christianity and you have those beliefs and hold them so strongly, you kind of can't interpret or think outside of like what, you know, what is the one people in translation, like the biblical context. But so yeah, I feel like I've seen a lot of people not really catch that what he's saying is that, you know, religion and Christianity in particular was, you know, inflicted upon him through colonization the same ways that, or in different ways, but in the same context as, you know, that happened to Black people and, you know, just globally as well. And that how even everyone kind of joined in and was able to like say the prayer, but the prayer didn't necessarily save, you know, anyone from any of these things. Yeah, and just I think so much, even as he was dying, the kind of music and the score playing the Rocky Road to Dublin song that it was like his number and just, yeah, and also I think it shows what his like motivations were beyond like, you know, evil vampirism, like you have that level to it, but also he has the motivations of like wanting to connect again to his people as well. And that's the reason why he wants to take Sandy and to incorporate him into this, you know, sort of vampire cult that they've now built in. Yeah, so I'll pass it off. But yeah, I think it's a very important scene, and if you don't kind of get that, then you may walk away from it being like, well, Sammy should listen to his dad. And it's like, no, that's not the, no, that's not, so, yeah.
Yeah, this is the part where I go, oh, yes, vampires. I get it, right? Because, saying, you want your stories, you want your songs, right? And I'm thinking, to what you were hinting at earlier, Francesca, about like the music industry and how it treats Black people and Black artists, right? And how like corporate music executives act as vampires, right? Trying to, leech the talent, right, from Black artists while then, leaving them out to dry, right? And, for those who they are able to incorporate into this music making machine, they end up making little copies of themselves, creating new vampires that then mimic their understanding of music or how music is supposed to be made or the form it's supposed to take, right? So I'm reminded of that when, everyone who was at the juke joint is now a vampire and now they're singing Irish folk songs, right? And yeah, just to the complete abandonment of their own tradition. But to your point, I also can see or maybe interpret it in a way that he wants the songs and stories as a kind of redemption for himself, right? Because if we think about how the Irish became white, a part of that is abandoning your own ethnic and cultural heritage, right? That we see the vampires in the film trying to reclaim as they're performing their own folk songs, right? So I think in certain ways, there's a confluence of experience there when we talk about the erasure of our cultural and folk histories.
Not just that, but like an erasure of individuality too. Because that was the thing that was horrifying to me. It's like, yeah, if you see a vampire movie, you're talking about stealing bodies, labor, culture, all of that, right? The blood itself. But that idea that it's like you lose who you were, you lose your humanity.
Right.
That had me going, oh damn, that's the real scare in this. The claws and makeup, they can take that off, but the other stuff we see already.
And then at the end of it, the only salvation after you become a vampire is death, right? So just again to, this pushing back on the fear of death, it's actually death that liberates them from their condition as being a vampire.
It's interesting. I'm sorry. No, it's interesting too, how the Lord's Prayer in this sort of rejection, and I've heard this before, right? And how Christianity was used as sort of a draw to, either to, but whatever one's intention was, to enslave folk, right? To get people to buy into something, right? And everybody knew it. He was saying, I've heard this before. It's like, I've heard that song before, right? And so I thought that was pivotal. It was like, okay, what's gonna kill this dude? Right? That's right. It's not gonna be a church hymn, that's for sure. And so, because, if you look at the Irish history, they were, conquered by the British. They were the first colonizers, and, for them. And so, it's on and on and on. And so that whole colonial theme and appropriating cultures and stuff, comes into play, all in that one scene for me.
Yeah, I think just echoing what everybody said, the idea of cultural appropriation just keeps popping up in my head when I saw that scene, because it's like, in order for Sammy to almost progress, it's like he has to like give himself away, he has to lose everything, and he has to become like everyone else. There's like this kind of detriment of conformity. And so it's like that's the price that you have to pay if you want to make it or if you want to progress as a musician. And I was just thinking about even when they were like dancing in that previous scene and the juke joint like kind of goes up in flames. Another thing that came to mind was just like the history of just like Black businesses and Black neighborhoods being burned down. Because it's like you see so many times in history where Black communities were thriving, they were trying to do their own thing, they had their own peace, they had their own freedom, and then they came down and burned it up. And so, I think that to me, for some reason, that was symbolic, and I kind of tied it to that history of every time, Black people tried to do something historical in this country, it's always been burned down, it's always been teared down. And even in those few hours that they had in the juke, when they're talking about the freedom that they had in the movie, like, even though it was such a short period of time, like, that was the one time in my life that I felt free and I was alive for this time. So I don't think that's something to last over to.
One thing that, I'm sorry. Yeah, one thing I think is I figured it's kind of complicated is that when they died or whatever, and the fire was ascending to, is it going to heaven, or what was it going to, right, but also too, the little specks of fire that was in the sky, was, African mortals are our ancestors as well. These ancestors, was ancestors, what is the role of ancestors in that space?
And even too, in relation to ancestors, like that guitar, which I think is a really interesting part of the story, the guitar, which was it Stack, I think Stack tells him that it was Charlie Patton's guitar, and they were actually their fathers, who we learn in the story is like, for all intents and purposes, not a good man, he, was, brutalized men, and like, they didn't have that relationship, but still in all, it's like he kind of gets that gift from him, and that's really what is the only thing that stops from it, which is really interesting, and like, just the concept of like, what we think was good and bad, and and all of that, that's like happened, but yeah, I think that was important that like the guitar specifically came from ancestors, despite the, the context, the earthly context of their relationships, but yeah.
I also thought this scene was a nice departure from, I feel like up to this point in the film, Preacher Boy tracks very much with like a Robert Johnson that I think in reviews of the film, I think a lot of people, see, alignment between Preacher Boy and Robert Johnson. And for those who don't know, Robert Johnson was a famous blues musician who, the legend goes that he, initially when he wanted to begin playing music, he wasn't that great, right? He wanted to be a blues musician because he didn't want to work in the field and he saw it as a way out. And so he tried to start playing at juke joints. He wasn't that great. And then he disappears for a year and a half and then returns, and all of a sudden he's amazing. And he becomes this super huge star, right, in the blues, and then tragically dies at the age of 27. And then he begins this kind of trend at the 27 of being familiar with that idea. But, the legend is that while he was, disappeared, he went to the crossroads somewhere in Mississippi and sold his soul to the devil so that he could, become a great musician, right? And so when this scene came up, I was like, yeah, what if Robert Johnson, rejects the devil? Yeah. Right? Which is like kind of what happens in this scene. It's like, instead of like his career and his life kind of ending abruptly, Preacher Boy continues to go on to live. And I love that scene after the end credits, because I think if you end the movie, like before the credits, like at the first ending, you might walk away thinking, the blues is evil, right? Black music is evil. It only leads to, to death, right? However, we see Preacher Boy continuing to play, and continuing to live, right? To the point where he's been left alone when Stack and Mary come back, right?
And he's playing for people, and he's also playing for himself. That other himself.
What's interesting too, with that, maybe it's connected, maybe not, is that discouragement. With these scars, which is also in some cases in African, or those scars are sort of protectors, or you wouldn't do some vulnerable rights or something. And so he was protected also, ironically, by scars, in that scene.
Yeah. It's even in the banner.
Yeah.
Poster for it.
Sure.
before we turn things over to the audience, I just want to make sure that everyone got a chance to talk about what really grabbed them, or if there's a point or insight that we can get to questions.
Well, I'm gonna say it even though it's gonna seem biased toward me, but I think people don't really talk about Mary in this movie.
Yeah.
You know, and that there have been Black people of my color for a very long time. I'm so surprised in 2025 people act like, you know, you're Black. I'm like, yeah, there are Black people who look like that, you know, and it was really refreshing. I was looking online, just checking things about the film, and there's this syllabus. It's called it's like Bloodlines and something, and it's on this website called saynomo.com. And they had this whole section where they just talked about, yeah, what about Nella Larson's passing? What about this? What about that? All these things where we have talked about that in the culture for a long time, right? And that Mary has not just this relationship with Stack, she has, you know, she helped raise those two with her mom, right? That the parents had a relationship and that it's very much deeply rooted, you know. And then there's even that part in the scene, I'll go back to the cornbread scene again, where they go, well, she's in here, and then like, she family, right? And I was really glad to see that in a way where it didn't make her the central character, because I think this is supposed to be a story where we're centering Black voices, right? And not just, you know, somebody be like, oh, we gotta have a light-skinned girl in the front. No, it's a story where we're looking at the people who don't always get a chance to have a say-so. So for me, that was really important to show the range, to show that there were Asian Americans in there, to show that there were Indigenous people who tried to warn you. And historically, as always, we have not listened in American culture to what Indigenous people have had to say. So it was like the placement of putting all these people in conversation with one another was really powerful. But it also made me think about one other short thing. There's an article where they were talking with Justin Simeon and Ryan Coogler, and the headline for it was, whoever controls cinema controls history. I think it was in creative screenwriting. And it just made me think back to Toni Cade Bambara in Deep Sightings and Rescue Missions, her collection of essays. And she talked about this, that film is going to be the language of the future. So I think for us to be here, where Black people are doing more speculative stories, more horror stories, it doesn't surprise me that book bans are becoming more stringent. Because if we envision the future, that means we can envision possibility. So I just want to put that out there. I think it's important for us to remember that we have a duty to the future, not just to save history and reinvent history and include history that we haven't told. So yeah, I had to get that out and get off my heart.
Yeah.
I'll just add real quick, just I also want to talk about just like gatekeeping culture, because I think that was kind of the repercussion of how everything kind of fell apart. That's why I love like the idea of vampires, because they're always trying to keep them out, right? And so many times there's conversations in the Black community about like gatekeeping culture, or if we don't gatekeep it strong enough, then like that's when it gets, you know, it gets messed up, or you know, it gets distorted, and we don't have control over any of it anymore. And so just the idea of them trying to like just preserve to just their community, and they didn't want the vampires in, and once the vampires get in, everything falls apart. And I think that kind of speaks to just how Black culture has been impacted by other communities around it in today's day and age, but also the opposite of the gatekeeping, where people can kind of pass through, where you see like her name, Bo and Grace, so, where one of my favorite scenes is when we see them walk from the white side to the black side, and how like seamless it was, and it was just like, oh, that's just what we do, and we can do it because we're just kind of in between. And that is something that I don't think we really talk about historically a lot. And even Mary, like, she could kind of, like you say, like, walk on the white side too. And kind of the privilege that comes with that too. So, that's what I loved about this film, kind of touching those things. So.
The privilege also of the still the making choice though, to still be in community with people.
Yeah.
Like, like I think, and people had a lot of like conversations from, the other characters who are not Black and kind of around like solidarity and stuff like that, but I think this really showed a very like organic and rooted kind of example where it's like they are here together and they do choose to be with each other because of, who they are and how they connect and what their values are beyond the, the structural systems at play. But then there is too, like you're saying, that level of like, you can move in different ways that I can't move, and then like what's truly, like how does that then really just fuel this work that,
I don't think it's insignificant that Mary is the person that starts this whole thing. Like, she's the first person to be turned, right? Like, it's because she's able to go out and talk to white people and like they're able to engage, and then she comes back and then begins this process of affecting everyone else, right? Which made me think of, historically how, the general understanding of Black studies is, that, people of mixed race, right? There's this idea that their existence is meant to spark divisions between races, right? That a mixed race identity like holds, inevitably within it this racial tension, right? And that a mixed race person embodies this tension, right? And I think that, that character symbolically, I think, told that one.
I think one of the things that I wanted to share this earlier before we started was my reappreciation for the blues. Right, it's like, oh wow, now I'm listening to Sun Seals a lot differently now, right? I was playing Howlin' Wolf on the way up here, getting all hyped up. I was like, wow, right, and just really getting recharged around, and really a deep appreciation in listening more intently. I had the opportunity to go to Robert Johnson's grave, I guess, because they don't know for sure, right? This is the one. They had a lot of whiskey bottles around it, so it could have been that, right? Yeah. But I just had this huge chill, being in that sacred space. This is Robert Johnson, Crossroads, all the mythology that goes with that.
Right.
And I just felt I was in a space where I'm with this historical figure, I'm with this guy, and I only listened to him once. I just knew the middle. When I got back home, I got all his albums, right?
Yeah.
And so I just this reappreciation for the music, and and when I go to concerts, I don't see a lot of people who look like us at those spaces. And so that's also, I don't know if that's problematic, it is what it is, because you can certainly go someplace on West Side, South Side, and there's a lot of them listening to blues. Yeah. But just in general, that appreciation has been rebirthed, way that I really like.
One of my teachers, my early poetry teachers, was Sterling Plump.
Yeah.
So if you aren't familiar with Mr. Plump's poetry, he is deeply steeped in the blues. And one night he was like, look, we're done with class, we're going to the blues club. So we're sitting there in the club and he's just like, here, look at this poem. And we're listening to music at the same time. To him, that space was no different. It was being taught in two disciplines at once, right? And I didn't know about Von Freeman. I didn't know about, there were so many things I just learned just by being in the space. And I think we underestimate that kind of learning now.
The privilege that we have of being in Chicago that has that at our disposal in so many different ways. Yeah.
So that's my plug. Go to a blues club if you have not been to one yet.
And there's Kingston Rhyme
and Buddy Guys and Roses.
So far as right on the corner, right? You know, like they play blues right now.
Kingston Rhymes is like up the street. Yeah, it's not far from here.
Let's open things up and hear what you all have to say. I can call on you. Would you be in microphone? Would you want to speak?
Not at the moment, so you'll have to project.
Okay.
Projection.
I'm curious about what you guys think about the parallels between the guitar and the thing that harms revenue and the fact that these talents that she used smoke prevent staff from getting to him, and what that has to do with Sandy being close beside of the empires and like their desire for access to like their.
To me, they're the most powerful people in the film. Like Smoke and Stack, yeah, they're military trained. You know, they have robbed 2 major gangs in the film. They ain't no joke, right? But in terms of the spiritual power, the import for the culture and carrying people forward, you have the artist, the musician, then you have a spiritual leader. And if you have those secrets, you can do anything. So for me, I'm like, yeah, of course that's who they're gonna go for, right? It's like, you can't train that. That is something that comes from whatever higher power you have, you know? At least to me, anyway. I don't know, you guys can let me know what you think, but I always think, you know, particularly in the years that I've worked with John, that power of the praise poem, that power of calling on the names of the people who came before you. And I think one of the things that sustains me, and I think sustains the people who survive in this film, is that ancestors don't die until we stop saying their name. Right? And if we think about it that way, it's like, yeah, we keep their history alive. We keep their spirit alive. We keep the stories that might sustain us in difficult times alive. You know, like I talk to students today, and if you ask them, can you name anybody who was part of a slave revolt? And many of them cannot. You ask them to name a blues musician, many of them cannot. And that's not students' faults. I think that's that's all of our responsibilities. If we have that, we have to share that.
I think too, like the ritual practices that allows for that understanding too, like, you know,
Right.
the libation.
Absolutely.
You know, that gives honor, you know, or just, you know, you have an altar, or, you know, whatever that ritual practice that kind of connection to your ancestors, and it's like, oh, is this voodoo? They know it's voodoo, right? You know, but it's all good because it still connects you with your ancestors in a way that's you, that's connected to your whole lineage, that's who you are. You know, I am because they were, you know, whatever that is, and that's that sort of importance.
It's very noble, but I think about too, there's so many hoodoo practices people do, they don't really know it's hoodoo. Like, I have never broken this habit. If I move to a new place, I got a brand new broom. And then people were like, why do you do that? I said, I don't know, I think it's my inner hoodoo compass. You know, you don't bring the old energy into the new space.
Right.
And I didn't know that for the long, I just thought it was just something you just did. And then like, no. You know, so I think that's worth considering too, is like, what are the superstitions in your family? You don't quite know where they came from, or the little practices.
Yeah, I'll add too, in terms of the libations things, I never really understood until later why, you would see guys on the corner and they would open up they would open up a wine bottle or something like that, and they would always first pour some
For somebody
on
going
the
here.
ground.
The homies.
And I'm like, that's all they do, and I found out that they're giving the ancestors some.
Yeah.
You know, and but growing up as a kid, it didn't register. And, you know, you just mentioned about the broom. When I got my house, I walked around my house.
Mm-hmm.
And I said a little something.
Yeah.
Walking around my house to protect me and my home. You know, so yeah, we do, you know, it's like, I didn't think about it until you just said it. It's like, yeah, I do this kind of stuff. You know?
I think that's what makes it magic though, is the subtlety of it. You know, that it's so intuitive that we don't even know that we're doing it. And so it can just do its thing, right? And if we tap in, we can recognize it all the time and all around, right? But it's like always a subtle power, right? That is like buzzing about.
That's what I was thinking about, the threshold too. Like, you go to certain places, something is at the threshold. Like, I don't want to say what it is, or, you know, different people use different things, but that thing at the threshold is like a barrier. Certain things can't cross it. I was like, and now all the new age people will be like, put some salt outside your door. It keeps everything fresh and clean. I'm like, salt does a lot of things. We don't talk about it. Yeah, if you're not eating it, that's
It reminds me too, though, of the juke joint as a sacred space that needed to be gate kept, right? Because they had one friend who was kind of manning the door. And that makes me think of something I was going to say earlier in response to something you said, John, about ritual practice. And I was thinking about how the gathering at the juke joint itself is a representation of the kind of ritual practice. And I think the scene we all viewed together demonstrates that, because we then see how that practice of expression called in, you know, the history and the future of what would come, like with that Black music, and the ways that this practice of dance and of singing and playing music really called into the space this long history. Right? So in the act of expressing, we are maintaining the memory.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the archive is living within us in a sense. Right?
So he's making a movie, I think, and it was a homage to his uncle. Who had passed, I guess, you know. Yeah, and he was a blues musician or something related to blues. Yeah, and this was sort of you know, so this was the thing that got him thinking about this. So.
Anybody else out there? What else?
Hi, Dr. Johnson. I really liked the thought you gave when it came to smoke. I believe Smoke and Annie, and how Smoke was very wary or like kind of dismissive of Blue because of how it didn't save his daughter, how it didn't save their daughter, but then at the same and saying that like it didn't work because of that, but at the same time you also acknowledge just the limitations of voodoo and belief systems in general, because when it came time for the for Rummy's death scene and how Stanley is uttering words of a faith that's highly exalted within our world, especially in America, and then safety isn't guaranteed through that, or safety isn't found through that. I like that parallel of just like the limitations, where you see one of them being called like kind of crazy or out there, and the other one is still again a split, it's still like a ruling school of thought within our world. So I really like just the nuance and the respect that was given, and you all talk about it with such great, like, nuance, such great information, and I love it. So yeah, I just wanted to make that comment.
I really like that you're touching on kind of just like in a historical context, like the validity of like, you know, belief systems related to magic and versus like Christianity or organized religion. It's like throughout human history, they both kind of coexisted and had like long histories and stuff. So I think in our time, we kind of think of it as like, you know, not as prevalent. But for like so much of human history, it was, and it was considered just as much of like a belief system that people followed as other things. So yeah, I like that you're highlighting.
What's interesting too is that even the names, and we go forever with the names, but Smoke Stack.
yeah.
Smoke Stack Lightning, that's a album song. Right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know, so I mean, there's so many of those little things like that.
Yeah.
I thought of them too, of their names as indicating also their travels,
Right.
right? Like if you think of a smokestack on a train, like they have literally been traveling back and forth.
Right.
They went from Clarksdale to Chicago and then back down, which I thought was really significant because we often talk about the migration from south to north, but we rarely talk about how people often returned to the south when they found that in the north, they didn't find the kind of freedom that they were expecting or that they were promised, right? And, you know, that comment about Chicago just being Mississippi with big buildings,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, it's that disillusionment that, yeah, I'd rather be with the devil than I know, back home, right? And at least here we can establish a place for ourselves. There's literally no space in Chicago.
Yeah.
People are, you know, squeezed in together. There's, you know, there's not the existing infrastructure that is already in place within the South, right? People have their own institutions, and so people felt that need to return. So I saw that their names, you know, may have arisen in certain ways, like their travel back and forth across.
It was interesting because the other names was like biblical names.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are biblical names.
I would like to hear your interpretation of Stack and Mary, you know, living. They walk out the door after they kind of went 29. So what does that tell us?
What are they?
I kept thinking, there's that moment where we don't see what happens with Smoke and Stack, and he could have killed Stack. And I'm like, yeah, they had a conversation. Because as soon as he says, I should have kept you safe, and he says, you always did. You always did. I was just like, he couldn't kill his brother.
Yeah.
So they just said, look, we gotta get Preacher Boy out of this. He's like, all right, I'll let you go if you let me go save him. I think that's what the implied conversation is.
Yeah.
And they were just like, all right. He's like, I'll come and visit Preacher Boy in a little while. You know.
It's an attempt though to, you know.
Yeah.
Bring him
He's
over
like,
to the other side.
you had enough of it. Yeah, like, you had enough of this. I know you're getting old. You know, maybe you don't want your joints to hurt no more, you know?
Because he smelled them on them. He smelled.
He knew it was coming.
He knew it was coming.
Yeah.
So those characters who move on and live amongst us, so what is that?
They're, in my opinion, I feel that they're trapped.
Yes.
In a certain sense, because his response, Preacher Boy's response when they ask him if he wants to go with them is, I've seen enough of this place.
Yeah.
Right? And so, right, again, to speaking to like death as the liberatory, you know, thing here, right? That he welcomes his continuation on into the next life, that they can't live, right? Because they're stuck in this kind of perpetual cycle on earth. Right? So it's like he's the free one, right? Because he gets to move on.
And it's like that perpetual frustration of vampires. Like if you watch enough vampire movies, you know, there's always one that's like, I'm tired of this. I've done everything, I've been everywhere, I speak all the languages, and I'm like, can it just end? And you see that even with, what's the new one? The Vampire Lestat series.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, the new one with Louis and the brother from Louisiana. What's the, or did they change the characters and I'm mixing those?
Well, no, that's just gonna be the next season is gonna focus on the white vampire.
Yes, but up till now, it's been about the brother and him and how he saw what happened.
Adopted daughter.
Yeah. Is it Claudia?
Claudia is her.
I remember the girl's name. I don't remember the main character's name. Just
Louis.
Louis. So Louis is going through all this existential crisis. Like he wants, you know, I don't really remember what happened, or is this what I want to do? And you're like, yeah. You know, how much evolution can you do over a few hundred years? Like you'll be tired of it. You know?
I think it's also worth recognizing in the conversations with Annie and people when she's telling them how a vampire works. And then when Remick was talking about the whole Lord's Prayer thing, there's this reiteration of this idea that they're not themselves, that something else has come in and occupied them.
Right.
And this colonial thing has come in, has absorbed all their knowledge, and they become a performance of what they were.
Yeah.
But they're not that thing anymore. And you kind of see that in Sammy's eyes when they come in. They're like, oh yeah, it's wearing their skin. But it's that ain't black. There's something not right there, and I'm not gonna tangle with it.
Everything's indicated through the eyes.
Yeah, everything's indicated through the eyes.
Goes back into the snake, everything is, the eyes have a certain color. In the snake, and I was like, I've never seen a snake's eyes have those, right? Right,
Like that iridescent thing.
right.
Just to add to that, what's the saying, often imitated, never because the scene where Cornbread first turns and he comes to the door and he's speaking, and just even the way he's speaking, they're like, you wouldn't normally talk like that.
Yeah. Something's not right.
They're trying to, whoever has occupied him is trying to portray this, whatever they feel like Cornbread would have been, but they can't even do it.
Yeah.
And they immediately catch it, like, wait a minute. So, yeah.
So people can become stereotypes of themselves, right?
Yeah.
Where they're either shucking and jiving, or they've got the cool outfits and the things that are like the cool, sexy things about blackness, that they get to walk around and show it. But inside, there's something that's just not right. And we know it's not right.
Yeah, because Max come in, he's got the Coogee
Yeah,
sweater,
yeah.
All those very 90s down.
Yeah, he's showing the blackness of the time.
Yeah.
But there's something pitiable about it.
Yeah. Yeah, so
On the positive of that kind of transgenerational difference between staff and what he's trying to marry. There's this really good video I watched where the video essayist was talking about how, like, when staff was speaking with Sammy, and he was like, it just doesn't sound the same. Like, it's like, the music just isn't the same. I prefer the original. And she was talking about how he prefers the original because he's never meant to hear what's being played then. Because he comes from a different generation, and the point of, like, art is meant to be passed down. You're not meant to kind of make the art of your generation immortal. You're meant to pass it down to the next generation and allow them to take it and transform it into what represents their cultural zeitgeist. And I kind of, like, with Kayla, remember you saying at the beginning of this, how, like, it's one of the best movies you've seen. And I think it's really both great and sad how Sinners is really one of the best and most original movies to come out in recent years, with just the never-ending adaptations and remakes and sequels and all of that. Like, it's really nice to see this original story, especially one that centers Black voices and a current Blackness or a form of Blackness that is usually demonized or kind of shrouded in this stereotype. I really appreciate it, and I think that's really great that my people have got the ability to make something so bold. And I kind of wanted to ask your opinion about the state of filmmaking. I know that's kind of like not necessarily what this is about, but like, especially when it comes to Black voices and Black stories, and how this is like a great example of what Black directors can do when given the money, given the chance. Do you think that this movie is a sign that change is coming, or do you think it's kind of like a wanted that thing? I was just gonna say that whatever deal he was able to do with Warner Brothers is, I think, the first of its kind, really, but he owns it, which is like crazy, and even just the parallels too of like the characters in the movie, how ownership is wanting to have something that's their own and that they can pass down and tend to. They didn't get to have that experience, but like this is like a revolutionary way of like, being able to make art in conjunction with the film industry that we have. And so I would really hope to see like a lot more filmmakers be able to do this. Ryan Coogler definitely had to like put his blood, sweat, and tears into like, not necessarily the machine in terms of making things that aren't still great. Like, we love Black Panther and Creed and all of those things, but he kind of had to build up his credibility for them to almost be able to give him that. He had to do the Marvel before he could make Sinners. And so
maybe, you know, a hope that we can have is that other people can kind of, get to a place of just being able to, you know, make decisions, or make the Marvel, or, you know, to do whatever it is that they wanna do, but then also to have some kind of ownership over that and to be able to leverage that for their family, their generation, and for Black people in general, instead of making things that then get owned and, you know, recycled in perpetuity, you know, by Warner and the AI and all of that. So, you know, yeah, but he really like kind of changed the game with even being like a matrix. Which is great.
I would think too, that there's so many, just about Black voices. I mean, you have so many avenues now. I mean, the streaming, you know, and you also have like the Black, Film Festival, Black Harvest Film Festival. You know, you have all these sort of, you know, these festivals, and oftentimes I don't see a lot of us in those spaces. Real talk, it's like, you know, I don't see a lot of us in blues concerts, right? So I hear you, but I would challenge that, you know, there are incredible, folk who are making, maybe not having the budget.
Yeah. Not $50 million.
Right, yeah, right, but we're doing incredible work around that shit. You know, just authenticating Black voice.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, you know, it's, are we watching? Are we going to these places?
Yeah.
You know, you got Bassett's Film Fest, you got Bassett's right down the street on Fullerton, and they had the Black Film Fest, they had Black Diaspora Film Festival. I don't see a lot of us there.
Yeah.
You know, and those are new emerging, you know, directors and writers, and, you know, so we gotta go out and support it.
And truth be told, I mean, DePaul has one of the top 10 film departments in the country.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many Black film students are there. You know, I mean, I'm not indicting, I just think it's a good question to ask, right? Or if you're interested in film, you know, we have a place where you can actually get that experience. And I think that's important too. And if you're in a program like that, are you actively seeking out the films that speak to those experiences you want to see on the big screen? Like, I taught at TTS for a while, and even my white students were like, why am I only seeing these types of monologues? Right? It wasn't until I was like, I brought in Joe Bonnie's Extreme Exposure. I said, everybody's picking a monologue. We're going to talk about why you chose it, and then we're going to you're going to perform it. Right? And students were like, I've never seen one where it was a character like me. Right? And that's a shame. You know, it's a shame when you talk to these students where they could potentially be on TV, on major motion pictures, and you have to tell them, you know, if you have power, you may be able to produce someone else's story. Which story would you pick and why? And I think those questions are really powerful for where we're headed. Now, do I think we're going to go back? No. There's too much opportunity, too many ways to fund it. You know, we don't have to do what Oscar Michaud did, who was one of the first Black filmmakers in America. He was knocking on people's doors. Yeah, brother, will you give me some money for this film? We don't have to do that. You know, or you might be like, go on Kickstarter or GoFundMe. And there was a time, you know, I'd be like, whoever's making a Black movie, I'm putting $10 on it now, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a lot, but it makes a difference, right? So I tell you that to give you hope, that this is not just a flash in the pan, that the stories are so rich and they're becoming so original, it's undeniable. And then when they get that level of money, yeah, then you can follow the movie like Sinners with Ironheart, where we get to have a Black girl superhero who lives on the south side of Chicago. That makes me happy, you know? So.
Maybe it's a good time to close the formal part of this conversation, but let's definitely keep talking and eating and drinking.